the Miami Hurricanes, who have a brand new quarterback after losing Cam Ward from last year. What do you like about the Hurricanes going next year?
Well, I think, everybody's forgotten because of the struggles, some of the struggles he went through at Georgia last year, just how good Carson Beck is, right? The year before last, he was one of the, I would say, 5 best quarterbacks in America, right? We were expecting him to do that again this past season, but I think you've got a team that still has a lot of talent coming back. Their defensive line is still going to be really good, headlined by Ruben Bain. Their offensive line with Francisco Malinois there at right tackle. They've got a lot of pieces to work with, but it's going to center around Carson Beck. Now, they're going to have to be more balanced. Their secondary is going to have to be better than it was last year because that's what cost them a playoff spot last year, and I think they need to make up that difference because for as good as Carson Beck is, he's not going to be Cam Ward, right? Yeah. At least we don't think he's going to be Cam Ward and be, 4th in the Heisman voting and arguably the best quarterback in the country this past season. So I think it centers around Beck. It centers around having a little more balance in the run game, right? Mark Fletcher is still there in the backfield, and you've got a really good defensive line on defense. They just have to fix the back 7 of that defense and balance out this team a little more because you can't expect Beck to do things out of structure the way that Cam Ward did. In structure from the pocket, absolutely, he's extremely accurate. We know what he can do. We've seen him at the peak of his powers at Georgia, but now he has to go down to Miami and play that complementary role and at times win them enough games in the same way that Ward did, but he's not going to be able to improvise as much. They need to fix the back 7 of this defense. If they can do that, they have a shot to contend in the ACC.
Absolutely. If you just look at what Miami's losing, they are losing a lot of talent from last year's team. Obviously, Cam Ward, Xavier Estrepo, Damian Martinez, Elijah Arroyo. All those guys are gone, right? They do lose some guys on defense too that are pretty good players like Simeon Barrow and Francisco Malinois, but they do have a lot of guys to get excited about. And I think Carson Beck is getting slept on a little bit. I'm with you. He was the number 1 quarterback for us going into the year at Georgia. You still had a solid year overall. I think it was kind of overblown how bad Carson Beck was last year. I don't think it was that bad at all. He had still had like an 80 passing grade last year. Georgia had 31 drops on the season. That was tied for the second most in the Power 4. So he did not have any help at all in terms of that receiving core. And I think a big part of that was obviously losing Brock Bowers and Lon McConkey. It didn't look the same, but I still thought Beck was good enough last year. And since over the last 2 years, he has a 90.9 overall grade. That's the second best of any returning quarterback in the country, right? So I think Carson Beck's still one of the best quarterbacks in America, and I think he'll still be that at Miami next year. But you're right, they're going to have a lot of different players now in that receiving core. They still have a really good right tackle and Francis Malinois, who might be a top 10 pick for some people on the offensive line. But it's going to be a lot of pressure on Beck next year with that brand new receiving core. I mean, they right now are projected to start a true freshman at one of the receiver spots in Malachi Toney, right? So he was a talented kid coming out of high school, obviously, but only a true freshman. You got a true sophomore and Josiah Trader, another wide receiver. So, and then C.J. Daniels transferring in from LSU, so hopefully he can have a better year than he did last year. But looking at the defense, though, they bring back Hakeem Mesidor. They bring back Ruben Bain Jr. is one of the best edges in America. Maybe play a little more interior D line is what they're talking about for him next year. So there is talent on this defense, and I like what they did in the portal as well, addressing the secondary, bringing in guys like Charles Brantley, really good nickel corner. Ethan O'Connor's a really good player from Washington State as well. So they did address the secondary. It might not be as good of an offense as last year's team, and you shouldn't expect that out of Miami, but I think Carson Beck is as good of a replacement as you could have hoped for getting after losing Cam Ward. So I think they did a pretty good job.
For sure. I think especially the floor he gives you and I know he went through a couple of spurts last year because he was really forcing it with the struggles at receiver and even at offensive tackle at Georgia, but for the most part, Beck is not going to lose you football games, right? Again, there was a couple of stretches, even the Texas game, the first one was kind of rough, but I think you mentioned it. Beck is as good as they could have done if they're still trying to contend with Clemson in the ACC this year.
Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.